Welcome to the So Much More podcast, where we talk with people in the custom window treatment, soft home furnishings industry, and so much more. I'm your host, Seal DeGuglielmo. I had the opportunity to meet Elki Camacho, who did a Circle Time webinar, the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library, and in talking, we decided it would be fun to do a podcast together. So as a business coach and someone who is in corporate America, I thought she had a lot to bring to the table, and I really do hope that you enjoy hearing from Elki today. If you are a member of the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library, you can access her Circle Time webinar through the library. I hope you enjoy hearing from Elki today. Hi, Elki. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me here, Seal. I'm delighted to be with you.
I had such a great time getting to know you a little bit before we recorded a Circle Time webinar for the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library. And I realized our conversation really could go a little further. So that was why I invited you to do an episode of the Opportunity Thinking series of the podcast. There are several reasons why you in particular I thought would be a great guest. One of them is because, like many of the people in the soft furnishings industry, you had a different career and changed it to become a solopreneur. And also you have a little bit more knowledge of our industry than many other people because of who you are. So let's start out by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what your business is.
Sure, thank you. So my name is Elki Camacho. My company is called Elki Consulting Group, and I specialize in business design and growth strategy. Really, it's looking at the components of a business, what's working, what's not, what's making you money, what's draining you of money, everything from process, technology, operations, the financials and marketing, all of your big bucket pieces. And so I service a lot of small business owners in various industries. I am not an expert in any one industry, but the beautiful vantage point I have is really being able to take a lot of the knowledge that I've gained over the years and apply it to teaching other business owners how to be successful in running their business and operating their business and growing their business. And growing takes on all sorts of different forms. It's not just in revenue or just in size or footprint, but really being able to enjoy the business that they have dreamed up in their heart.
That is such an important part of it, I think. When some of us think about growth, it doesn't necessarily feel like a joyful experience, but most of us started these businesses because it held, there was a passion and there was a pull to do something different than what we were doing. So tell us a little bit about how you got started and what were you doing before you started this business?
Yeah, so I come out of a corporate career. So I spent most of my years, around a decade and a half, in corporate pharma, and then I went into corporate beauty. So I really, I straddled two interesting hemispheres, training and development, which dealt with a lot of adult learning, marketing and sales, as well as IT. So it was sort of an unlikely marriage of focus areas in a business. But it really gave me a tremendous vantage point. Responsibility-wise, I had global impact. I had teams all over the world. I worked on projects from inception to delivery, so to crossing them all over the finish line. And really having a background in training and development gave me a very great foundation in working with adults from a behavioral psychology perspective, looking at motivation, looking at roadblocks, looking at different learning styles and teaching styles. And so it afforded me the opportunity to learn how to communicate things in such a way that others will understand, how to break things up that are complex and really make them simple, which serves me very well in my business today. Ironically enough, you spoke to some of the inside knowledge that I have of this industry. I am the daughter of a fabricator. I have my mother, her name is Elki Horn. Interior Elegance by Elki is her fabrication workroom, and she is phenomenal in this space. And so I grew up having a mother who also ran her own business. After doing a career pivot, my mother started her work life in dentistry. She was a dental hygienist. That was what she was trained and schooled for, and then made a pivot into the fabrications industry. And so I had the privilege of seeing that and growing up and being on the periphery and being really right there in the middle, watching her grow a business and start something that is now thriving and doing excellent.
Right.
So I'd say a lot of that sort of influenced my path and my decision. Moving out of corporate, I'd say, was a hard decision. I loved what I did and I was excellent at what I did. The challenge with pharma is that it's also an old institution, and it really left me wanting more. It left me wanting more for women. It left me wanting more for what I could do in my career, how I can apply my skills, how I can really make a dent. And again, I think working under or being in a family with a business owner such as my mom, really seeing some of the struggles firsthand that business owners were going through, it gave me such a unique perspective to say, hey, Elki, you know how to do this. You could do this at a really large level, help other people who are passionate and excited, and they have so much skill and talent for the businesses that they've opened, but perhaps don't have that solid business foundation that I had acquired along the way through my corporate journey, right? So I think that was part of my calling, and here I am.
Yeah. You, in one of our conversations, you mentioned noticing what was missing for entrepreneurs. So you've watched your mom. I know that you've been very instrumental in helping her because she shared that with me. But also, I'm wondering about the security of leaving a job that you had, that you loved and that you were good at, to do this. And many of us in this industry have done it, but we've all done it for different reasons. And sometimes the security, and I'm going to use air quotes here, isn't really what we think it is. And there were many times people shared in their story with me that they got laid off. And so they needed another thing. But to choose to leave the security of that kind of job, I would love to know how that felt and what kind of response you got from people leaving that secure job.
That's such a multidimensional question. I'm so thankful that you asked it. I'm excited to share. So the security, gosh, what's it like leaving the security of corporate? I had picked up a tremendous book, which I would highly recommend to anyone who's considering doing a pivot change. It's called Now What by Laura Fortgang Berman. And she talks about the career blueprint of your life. And it's really directed towards audiences that are looking to make a change. And in there, she had a number of exercises. Well, one of these exercises, Seal, was in preparing to leave and preparing to move into a new career direction, take time to list all of the different benefits that go along with your job, all of the different things that you like, you don't like, and take time to categorize what you're going to potentially miss. And at the first time I went through it, it was really abstract. And then, like a good student, I took out a pad and paper and I said, let me write this. And she gave examples to help me think a little deeper. And it wasn't just my 401k or stock options. Those were great. But it was things like I had dry cleaners coming to my office and picking up my clothes and dropping them back off. I had a gym on site that I had never paid for a gym membership. It was always included in a corporate benefit that I had, right there. By the time I left corporate, I had a doctor right on site. They had doctors on site if you need it. To be able to go down 8 floors and go to a doctor's office right there, not have to make another trip. There are all these little types of benefits. And the point of the exercise was to mourn them. Mourn what you will lose. And I remember putting it up on my whiteboard and writing it and thinking, what am I going to feel like when I don't have all of these things? And it seems so trivial, but it was such a profound exercise because it really made me drill into all the things that I liked. And I can, it took some time to really go through that exercise a number of times, but that book helped me so much. And that exercise helped me to emotionally prepare to leave, because I did. I felt like it was a new frontier. Yes, it was scary. Yes, there were risks. I wasn't going to have my 401k. I wasn't going to have direct deposit every 2 weeks. I had never been charged a fee for not having direct deposit. All these little things that you take for granted in a certain environment. And so, in doing this exercise, it really taught me to be able to separate the things that I had, the things that I've done, versus what I define as a part of myself.
Right.
What am I moving into this new space with, and what am I bringing with me? Mm-hmm. It was phenomenal. And, there's a lot of risks when I go back to what it felt like. I felt like a fraud. I'm going to put it out there.
Okay.
I felt so insecure. Every other day I was asking myself, how can I do this? What are you doing? You are getting, I looked around my office and I had awards and trophies. It's like, as an adult, what do you do with awards and trophies? But they were there. Mm-hmm. And it taught me something. It taught me something about the way that I internalized at that point in my life appreciation. I was an A+ player.
Right. And what your value was. Yeah.
Yes. In addition to my paycheck, getting a bonus, getting some sort of an accolade, getting recognized on stage with thousands of other people, that was special to me. It called out and it signaled to my brain, you're doing it right.
Right.
But now I wasn't going to have that moving into a business of my own. I wasn't going to have all these people recognizing my awards and saving the day for another department or some other big global project. And so it also taught me through that exercise to identify, what do I need to replace? I needed a forum in which I could give, in which I could be recognized in a way that I internalize. Mm-hmm. And feeling like a fraud, I think women, I in addition to my day job and all my spare hours, I have founded a women's mentoring group, right, designed to bring female mentees and mentors together, really not industry specific, but truly looking for that relationship building, that development, personal and professional. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is that, that fraud syndrome, that going into something feeling as though, what gives me the right to do this?
Yeah, imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, right? And so those were things that mentally I dealt with all the time.
Okay.
It was hard. I remember the first time I changed my LinkedIn to business owner, I felt like, oh my God, what are my colleagues going to say? You spend decades in a career. Of course you build up people that aren't so fond of you.
Right.
And for some reason, those were the voices and the opinions that I kept in mind. Oh, I'm not good enough. What are they going to say? They're just going to think that I'm this little girl playing in something. Right. So, moving in, while it was personally excited and I had a small group of people that I celebrated with, mm-hmm. It was so nerve-wracking. I felt like I was just coming on stage and it was so vulnerable. Yeah. It was so vulnerable. Probably for the first year, it really kept coming up so frequently.
Well, I'm really grateful to you for sharing that, because we talk about the imposter syndrome quite a bit in this industry. And again, I think for those of us who started our business because we had a skill, mm-hmm. It did not encompass all of the skills that one needs to run a business. But if we learned how to sew and we learned how to fabricate, we are certainly all smart enough to learn how to run our businesses, but we don't always perceive it that way. And I've also noticed that I've read Carol Dweck's book about mindset, and I find it fascinating how just a simple turn of things can adjust how we see them. And I remember watching someone talk about fear is the same as excitement. It's just the name we put on it. And the first time I heard that, I'm like, oh no, fear's real. And I carry quite a bit of it. And I'm very risk averse. And so fear is a big motivating factor for me. And I recognize that it hasn't stopped me from some things, but it has stopped me from a great deal. And so I've been trying to listen to stories like yours and say, if that were me, would I have gone ahead with it, or would I have shoved that little desire down and say, oh no, I'm too afraid to do that? And I realize there are many things that I've done that other people would be afraid to do. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of it is that mindset. How am I looking at this? And yes, it's fearful, but I want to go back to what you said about listing the things that you were going to mourn. And in talking with business owners in different stages of their business, I know that there are some of us who are moving into a different season of our lives. And for some of us, it means retirement. For some of us, it means not being able to run the level of business that we want to because we have small children at home, or we have a family member who needs our assistance and we're the one who has to do it. I've looked at how all of our businesses have changed over the years, and that particular part of it is so important. And knowing that you can pivot and that you can adjust is all just so, it's empowering, but I don't think we always see it that way. I think we feel not good enough.
Mm-hmm. You know, if I may, you know, some of the things that come to mind as you were saying that, I worked with a number of business owners on succession planning, and some of them are looking to leave their business perhaps to somebody up and coming. Some of them are really looking for an exit strategy. You know, what do I do at this stage of my life, or how do I start ramping up there? And, you know, that one exercise that I did many, many moons ago, I've revisited several times, really in that space of large pivots and new directional changes. Certainly, I think last year it came up in the discussion a lot of times because business owners frantically, due to COVID, were forced in a very reactive way to have to make hard decisions. Some of them had to completely stop doing things. Some of them had to just jump into the deep end, right? Cold water, and just go for it. And, you know, that exercise really taught me that part of the theme of what we wind up listing. So we can list and make lists of things that we loved in our business, pieces of it, aspects that we enjoyed. But really there's an underlying conversation oftentimes to the list that's made. And that underlying conversation is really where I like to direct attention, because that's the thing that needs to get fed. What are those things on the list saying about what you need? How are they fulfilling you? How are they satisfying you? How are you internalizing them as fulfilling and successful? And how, you know, what do they mean to you? And that looks different for every person. And it's not really until we get granular and go through that people then have a much easier time of saying, well, I don't need to be doing this exact same thing over the next 10 years. This now opens up the door for us to imagine and to envision doing something different that drives that same value, that same type of fulfillment, that same type of energy and excitement. And so it's a bit of a process drilling down, even, you know, looking at individuals who are saying, what is my exit strategy and what do I want to do? So much of that exit strategy conversation stems on how much do you still want to be active in your business, if that's still a part of it, if this is something that's happening in phases. And again, what is that activity doing for you as an individual?
Right.
And that makes it a lot easier to find the next bit of stepping stones moving forward and to craft a plan so that it's not all at once, right? Nobody wants to be shocked in life.
But I love that you're allowing for the time to mourn those things that are important, that you do enjoy. And I think that because I've reached a season in my life where I'm able to let go of some things and say, okay, you know, I'm not 25 anymore. So A is not going to happen anymore, but B is.
Yeah.
So I can take joy out of that. But it's okay for me to say, oh, I can't run as fast as I used to, or whatever it happens to be that helped to define who I thought I was. And I think that's really important.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So much of making space to move on and adopt a new direction, a new initiative, maybe, build out or invest in your business in a different way, comes from gifting yourself the opportunity to let go of things, right? Because it's when we just take it on, very basic principle of life. You receive, you retain, you release. We do it with air, we do it with food, right? And any one of those scenarios, if we're just constantly taking in, at a certain point, we reach capacity,
right,
and there's a poor outcome, right? There's some explosion of some type that happens. In business, it's the same way. As a business owner, as we move through different seasons and stages of our business, and our business continues to grow, there has to be a conscious mindset around, what am I choosing to let go? Sometimes we call it delegating. Sometimes we call it outsourcing. Sometimes we call it expanding our team so we have more manpower to get things done. But in essence, it's all a part of that conversation of, what are we going to let go so that we can adopt and look in this new direction, look through these new doors of opportunity, and make some space, So
I'm curious about the skills that you recognized in yourself. You had accolades, you had some awards that told you that other people recognize things, but now you're going to start your own business. So obviously you get feedback from your clients because they're succeeding and doing well, and that's a great feeling. But especially having that fear of being inadequate, what were you able to tell yourself about your skills that you knew you could carry forward?
Oh, that's a good question. So again, it was a process for me. I had to redefine what success looked like for me. I had to really take a moment to say, I think somewhere along the line, I had developed this perfectionist mentality in corporate that I really had to unlearn. And I had to take the conscious effort to say, I'm really striving for progress, not perfectionism. So I had to be very intentional about the words that I use with myself, what successful looked like. And a lot of what I do with other businesses is around planning and goal setting and really helping them map out a road to success. I had to drink my own juice, right? I had to make goals not for me to achieve, but in order for me to celebrate. I had to become very intentional about celebrating the new things that I was learning. What was something I learned this month or this quarter that I didn't even know about last year, right? There are things that I needed to constantly feed myself, that bit of inspiration and that bit of excitement and enthusiasm and recognition that I was doing some things right. Moving into this space, one of the things that it really taught me was that there's a true alignment with the people that you know personally. And let me rephrase this. There was great value in aligning the conversations around my friends and people that knew me in a very intimate and different setting, as well as those that knew me in a larger circle and maybe from a distance.
Okay.
Basically, what I learned was that the things that my friends told me I stunk at. The things that and what I would do is I would try to constantly justify why I made those decisions or tell myself I wasn't that bad. I had to get to the place of saying, it's okay to be bad. How can you get help? If it's not you, how are you going to get help in strengthening this area? And it's a continuous mindset. It's something that I adopt and practice often. But the idea that I'm going to be superwoman for my business is a fallacy. It's not true. It damages us so much. And it was something that I really had to step away from because when I'd listen to my sister, or when I'd go to my mother for feedback, or I'd go to some of my friends that have known me, and I would ask them, the hardest part was actually just asking.
Yes.
And the only one that was surprised was me. They would laugh and say, "Oh my God, you're terrible at that, but you're amazing at these other things." You know? And so finally I did the brave thing, and I said, I'm going to have courage, and I'm just going to listen to the things they say I'm not good at. If I'm really not good at it, does it make sense for me to struggle, go to PT for this type of skill that I need for my business? Or does it make sense to lean on someone who can help me, outsource or get training, get coaching, send it off to a bookkeeper, whatever the case might be. But it was really taking the courage to listen to the feedback, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And the balance of not allowing the negative feedback or the perceived negative feedback to carry more weight than the positive.
Right.
It gave me insight to saying, stop beating your head over, stop beating your head trying to do this.
Yeah. It's not important that you aren't good at this.
Right.
You can find a way to get it done by someone else or learn it. Yeah. So that was a vulnerable thing to do, Elki, I have to say.
It's not easy. It's not easy. But, there are a lot of not easy things that we do feel. And honestly, the only way that we I believe, get better at it is just by doing it. There is no amount of thinking through something that's not easy that makes it any not easier.
I've tried that. It does not work. I love to overthink about it.
Perhaps you're more well prepared. Perhaps you've considered all the contingency and all the different avenues, but it's still not easy.
Exactly.
And there are tons of not easy things that we accomplish day in and day out that we simply don't give ourselves credit for.
Right. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, and we don't celebrate that nearly enough when we do accomplish something. Okay, Agreed. So you mentioned success in the beginning of that. What is your definition of success?
My definition of success, gosh, I wish I had something really simple and transparent, but it really circles around growth. Okay. Success for me takes on different evolutions. Mm-hmm. If there are metrics that I'm trying to achieve, that's easy to click a checkbox and say, God, that was a success. Mm-hmm. It worked. But I've had to learn that success is very multifaceted. What does that look like in application? It means that for any program that I deliver, I typically set no less than 3 line items of what success looks like for me.
Okay.
If a certain number of people show up, if I enjoy myself during the conversation, if people are, whatever the case might be, but I give myself opportunity to say success is never just one-to-one. Hardly ever is success one-to-one. As a business owner, the outcomes that we're looking for, there are a bazillion of things that influence those outcomes, right? It's hardly ever just click one lever and magically you'll start making more money. Right. Stop doing this and all your problems will go away. So for me, success is an evolution of growth. It's that continuous journey of growth. And part of that growth mindset is being able to articulate, here's where I am, here's where I want to be. I'm closer, acknowledge and own and articulate that I'm moving in the right direction. A lot of success for me is being directionally correct. And my clients will tell you it's a term I constantly reiterate.
Yeah.
Are we directionally correct?
Yeah.
That's where we want to be heading.
Elki, I love that. I mean, I ask that particular question in all of my podcasts with all of my guests. I don't think I've ever gotten the same answer twice, which I love because it just points out that success is different for each one of us. But I love the idea, and any good coach that I have ever spoken with does talk about celebrating our accomplishments and successes. And I love the idea of each project having at least 3 items that tell me I was successful, because I think we don't acknowledge that enough of our own. We finish a project, we finish something that we worked months on, and we go, okay, what's next? Without taking that moment to say, darn it, I did this. Look at me. I'm good. And I did what I set out to do, which I think is a reminder to believe in ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. If I could backtrack a little bit to corporate, one of the things I found over the years that has really just benefited me in different ways, especially as a business owner, is taking the time to consider what skills, what elements of me as a woman, as a business owner right now don't serve me anymore. When I moved out of corporate into this space, when I was in corporate, I came from training and development, I came from IT. I was used to being the youngest in age, the one that didn't have all these letters at the end of her name. I was outranked, outgendered. I was typically one female to maybe 30 men in a room. And there were different types of armor that I needed to wear to go into that environment day in and day out. And when I moved into running my own business, when I moved into really developing these relationships with the client market and the clients that I wanted to nurture and move towards, I had to recognize I've got to shed some layers here. These skills are no longer necessary. They helped me in corporate. I'm thankful that I was taught, that I learned, that I adopted things that really helped me to stand my ground, to project, to own a room, or whatever the case might be. But I also had to recognize I had to develop new skills to really be effective with the audience and the people that I wanted to now. And that effort, and I think a little bit comes from Laura's book that I'd mentioned earlier. A little bit I think I picked up along the way, but it sort of became part of my New Year's routine where I would think of, this is where I'm heading next year. These are the types of things I want to accomplish, the new and crazy things I want to do.
Right.
What types of things do I need to get rid of that are keeping me from being that woman?
Yeah, that's
do
important.
I feel joy in the experience more? Do I want to allow myself to make a whole lot of mistakes? Do I want to, just do it and check it off the box? There were some things that I just allowed myself to try and say, I'm not starting anything new, but I'm just going to try it to get through that feeling of, oh, this is new and difficult and I don't know what I'm doing,
right?
And letting that be okay. And I think so much of that, again, as we go through business growth, as we go through growth as individuals, it's important to take time and stop and consider the skills that I have now. Are they the skills that I need to do the things I need to do?
Right. I love that. I want to jump in and take a moment to thank the sponsors who make it possible for me to bring you the podcast each week. My sponsors are people in the industry that I have personally had a connection to, purchased from, or used their services. So it makes it really easy for me to tell you about them and the great things that they have to offer. Because I feel so strongly about education in our industry, I'm thrilled that as the owner of the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library, I can use the resources of the library to help support the podcast. The library hosts the industry's largest curated collection of educational resources for the custom home furnishings professional. Membership to the library gives you access to a wealth of downloadable reference materials, videos, live events, as well as a community of support to help you develop your design, sales, and fabrication skills, and to grow or start a business. Join the library today at csfrl.org. Angels Linings would like to invite you to become part of their family. With reputable lining comes exceptional customer service. Trust them with your linings like I do. You get 2 Tootsie Pops with every bolt of lining you receive. For smiles, satisfaction, and a sugar kick all around, call Angels Linings at 1-800-450-9368. The Workroom Channel is the premier online training provider for professional fabrication skills. Go to theworkroomchannel.com to browse the selection of anytime access courses created by industry experts. Watch detailed demonstration videos, download companion materials, and participate in private course discussion boards with your instructor and classmates from around the world. Start your course path today at theworkroomchannel.com. If you've listened to the podcast, you know how much I've learned from Michelle Williams. And I think most of my guests have mentioned taking at least one of her classes or gotten coaching from her. Her business is Scarlet Thread Consulting. Michelle loves to work with creative business owners to help them understand all aspects of their business and to use their gifts and talents to make it profitable. Michelle is a strategic profitability coach certified in the Profit First methodology, and she can be reached at scarletthreadconsulting.com. I've also mentioned my membership with the WCAA, and I'm now a gold level sponsor, where education, networking, visibility, and industry discounts are just a few of the benefits that are offered to our members. The Window Covering Association of America is the only national nonprofit trade association that's dedicated to the window coverings industry, and the dealers, decorators, workrooms, designers, and installers that make up our membership. Join today at WCAA.org. WCAA, where you are never in business alone. I've also been extremely fortunate to be able to work with Merrill Y. Landis Ltd. It's a family-owned and operated custom workroom and product distribution company to the trade with over 70 years of experience. And in addition to their custom work, they offer a wide variety of decorative drapery hardware. They offer stout and flare 21 fabrics. They have Roman shade operating systems and assembly kits. They have motorization and workroom supplies, and they serve both designers and workrooms. And you can check out the MYL Advantage at mylLTD.com. At one point in one of our discussions, you talked about creating a network of support and what that looks like for the individual. And I love that. So if you could just describe that a little bit for me.
So one of the things that I often come back to saying is that your team is much larger than those who are paid, right? Oftentimes I talk to clients, I talk to them about their team, and they're like, what team? It's just me. Right? They're a solopreneur. They've got a great, thriving business, but it's really just them at the helm, perhaps, or a partner. And in their mind, they don't have a team. And again, back to mindset, when we blow out the definition of team, suddenly it allows us to consider that our team, those that help us succeed and get to our goals, that's part of our team. Whether or not you're an intern or you're on payroll or you're a contractor, that doesn't define whether or not you're on my team. And building a success network is a part of your team. And I think at different spaces and different times, we need different teams to be able to go to, right? In large corporate, you have your marketing team, you have your strategy teams, you have your sales teams, right? And all these guys are putting their heads together and they're coming up with ideas and conversation. Well, as a business owner, you're no different. Even if you're a business owner and of one, you still need teams to bounce things off of, to encourage you, to challenge your way of thinking, to give you a fresh perspective, right. Or really just to say, hey, I'm of a different opinion, or have you thought about this? Have you considered this? And developing that network, and I highly recommend it, especially for small business owners, because, and Seal, you've heard me share this before, as a business owner, the highs are highs and the lows are not low, they are lonely.
Yes.
Really, when you blow it, when you have made a mistake, when you just feel like, oh my goodness, I'm utterly embarrassed. How could this have happened? Which it happens to all of us, right?
It does.
Mistakes, this is a part of being human. But to have that network of people to go to, whether it's 2 or 5 or 10, however it is, and say, man, I just need someone to be in this embarrassment with me, because last week I did something and I was in tears. I sent out the wrong attachment, and it was the wrong attachment to a new prospect. And I was in tears at 11 o'clock at night, and I called a girlfriend of mine, and she led with, oh gosh, Elki, I have been there and I know how much that hurts.
Yep.
And it was her words that just made it okay for me to cry and to say, I blew it. And I said, what do I do? And she goes, you be yourself. Apologize, be transparent. Mistakes happen. It hurts, but nobody died on your table, right? And I had a mentor that used to always tell me, this isn't surgery here. No one's bleeding out on our table.
I actually had that same exact conversation with your mother last week. This is window treatments. It's important, and we are doing our best, but this is window treatments. And the level of perfection that we hold ourselves to is part of our reputation, but it shouldn't be what also holds us back.
Right. And that, I love that you said that word reputation, because oftentimes our reputation in our mind is often what holds us back from being vulnerable.
Yes.
Your success network, you're a network of women or individuals, men, women, I don't, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. If they're there to support you, they should be people that you can be vulnerable with, that you can open up, where there is no shame or embarrassment around the I don't know or I have no clue or I made a mistake. We want to be able to talk about those things. Sometimes you find that they have similar experiences. Sometimes you both help each other to succeed.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's a matter of the empathy, the comfort, right? Knowing that you're not alone in it. I have groups that I lean to for inspiration when I'm really stuck on something. Mm-hmm. And I think all of us, a great respect that I have for small business owners is the hunger. You mentioned earlier that you are mostly a risk-averse woman. You could be a mostly risk-averse woman, and yet running your own business is inherently risky.
Yes, it is.
Right? So on that spectrum, you're in the risk. Mm-hmm. You're in the risk pool. That's incredible. Sometimes we think, I'm very risk averse. I'm not in it. I'm not willing to make these decisions. Well, you're in it. So you're already ahead of the curve. Being in corporate, being in a secure job, there's a lot of safety there. Running your own business, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of risk, especially when we look to all the things that we don't yet know or aren't really that skilled in. Now, that's where we need people sometimes to help find inspiration, right? To help just recharge the batteries, remind you what you're great of, remind you of how far you've come, to celebrate the wins.
Well, and it's funny that you said that, because I really am, one of the things I'm working on for this year is listening to how I speak to myself. And so I say carefully about being risk averse, because then I am. But I think when I interview so many different people, it's a challenge for me to sometimes not compare myself to others. So it's a conscious choice that I make to be careful about that. Mm. But I remember one time talking to, I think that all three of my sisters, I have a large family, but my sisters are particularly successful in what they have done. And as the oldest sister, I'm very proud of each of them and what they've accomplished. And I was having a conversation with my sisters about owning my own business. And at the time, I was the only one. And my youngest sister turned and looked at me. She said, I give you a lot of credit. There is no way in hell I would want my own business. And Elki, I literally did not know how to respond to her, because I thought, you work in a business where the amount of money that is exchanged, and because she's in finance, that terrifies me. And I think if you can do that, you could own your own business. But that is not where her risk value is, or she's comfortable. And I remember thinking, I've often thought of myself as less than when I look at her and my other sisters. And I thought, but I'm doing something she would never consider doing. And it was one of those aha moments where I thought, okay, one, again, stop comparing yourself to other people. And number two, it really is important to talk with other people and hear how they see themselves. Like you mentioned earlier, how people see me. Be very careful who you take that information from. But to have her say that was a boost for me. Like, oh, I've done something that she wouldn't do. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So I find that fascinating.
I do. I love that. I love that you shared it. I love those aha moments, because I think so many of us that are business owners don't give ourselves enough credit for the daily risks that we take on. I was in a forum not too long ago, a couple of months ago, and somebody had asked a question and they double backed, and the person who answered said, oh yeah, I know all about that. I have $10 million budgets and I'm responsible for all this stuff. And they said, but is it your money? And they, well, I've done budget, I've done this, and they said, but is it your money? Because every dollar I make in my business is for my kids' future. It's for my home. It's for my retirement. Mm-hmm. It's going back into my business. It's for the life that I want to live. It's much different.
What's the impact?
Your dollar? Yeah. When it's your dollar and someone else's dollar, there's a whole level that you don't even need to consider.
Right. Right.
And as business owners, it's ours. It's personal. There's an identity that we sort of identify with our businesses. And it is a very risky space, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for, gosh, I'm doing it. It's not perfect, but I sure as heck am doing it.
And just another reminder of why we should be celebrating it, because if we make a mistake that affects and impacts our income or our reputation, we sure beat ourselves up about it or cry at 11:30 at night. Yeah. But when we do something that adds to the value of our lives and increases the value of the business that we've worked so hard on, we don't take that time. We don't go crazy celebrating like we go crazy beating ourselves up. And there really needs to be a little bit more of a balance there.
There sure does. I couldn't agree more.
There are questions that I ask in my normal interview podcast that I feel definitely apply here. What do you consider a failure, and how do you handle those mistakes? You talked about that a little bit just a minute ago, so I'm curious. I mean, I've had some of the funniest answers, and I love to hear the definition of success. I think hearing how we handle mistakes and failures is also really important.
So how I handle mistakes and failures, I'd say, is transparently and as authentically as I possibly can. Okay. I got many years ago, and this was feedback that continued to sort of resonate through the years. Somebody had shared that, man, you are the same in business as you are in this group, as you are as a friend. And I was so flattered, because the last thing I wanted to do was have my personality and my character so far from each other that you wouldn't know which was showing up. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be one woman on Saturday and another woman at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, right? I really wanted to bring those together and be me. And so there are things that when I handle mistakes, a couple of things that I've stopped doing. I've stopped assuming that it's all my fault. Right. So that was something I was really notorious for doing. And chronically, as a lot of women have shared in different arenas, I over apologized for things. And so I got curious a little bit. Some of it was intentionally saying, hey, I noticed this thing. What I wanted to do was this. Is this still acceptable? What I had intended to do. And sometimes I'd have to stop myself from saying, I'm sorry I didn't get to.
Yes, women apologize way too frequently. Yeah.
And I had to learn how to curtail that and to really consider, is this a mistake to them? Or is this really just a perceived mistake to me? Mm-hmm. Because I thought I was going to do one thing and I wound up going another way. Again, adopting this mindset of being directionally correct has really helped me. Yeah. To be able to move forward and to not constantly take every single detour as a mistake. On the flip side, when you talk about failures, one thing that I picked up along the way over the years, and I would teach a lot of my teams, I want to know the failures that you've tried, because they teach you something. If you're too afraid to, and when the whole innovation market blew up, a number of years ago, failure was talked about all the time, right? In order to win, you have to get comfortable failing. And it feels weird. And it takes some practice. It takes some time to get accustomed to, it's okay to fail. Mm-hmm. Try again. What did the failure teach you? What did you learn? If you fail and walk away, you've learned nothing and you've gained nothing. But if you failed and you consider what you've learned, you've gained so much. And so to change my mindset around the fact that I'm not going to be afraid of failing, and to intentionally move into new spaces and adopt new approaches to running my business, helping clients, delivering work that I do, and saying, I'm going to try something new. And sometimes I'll ask my clients, are you willing to try something new with me? Mm-hmm. Can we explore this? Can we be curious and creative? Can we try something that we haven't yet tried? And gaining that permission, being on board, helps you set up the expectation that it might not work out. Let's see what we learn.
Right.
The outcome then doesn't become the line of success.
Right.
The learning becomes the line of success. Right. All right, why didn't this, what caused it to go in this direction?
And what can we do to change it?
Exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
So we talked a little bit about the impact that growing up with a mom who had her own business had. Were there things that you looked at and said, that's not how I would do it? And I know that you've been instrumental in helping your mom with her business, but as a younger person watching your mom, did you ever look at it and say, yeah, I'm never going to do that. That's just way too much work or anything like that?
Anything like that. Yeah. So my mom is one of those super moms. She is incredible at so many things that she does in life. And she taught me some tremendous values and just approach. You know, she taught me to love reading. If you know her, she's always got her nose in a book, an article. If I could turn my monitor now, you'd see a wall top to bottom of books. You know, I can never get enough. There are things that I've looked at how she operates in business, and I'd have to say this was in the early years.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly what I'm referring to.
And in the early years of my business, when I would reflect back and look at my mom's business and say, gosh, I can't believe that's how she does that, or why would she do it that way? Now, years in, years later, now that I'm in a groove and doing it, I can totally understand why she does it that way. Yeah. Because sometimes it's just not that important to change, right? Like there are important to hear. Many decisions that you and I have to make as business owners on a day-to-day basis. And I guarantee you, many of them fall into the completely not important bucket whatsoever. Would I not do it that way? Absolutely. But that's just preference.
Yeah.
It doesn't hinder her. It doesn't keep her back. It doesn't hold her back. It's just a way that she chooses to do it.
Right.
And she made the decision that she's going to use her brain power and her time to focus on the things that are important.
Yeah.
And that's a really big one. It taught me a whole lot.
One. Yeah. It's funny because I can remember being in a workshop with your mom who was not leading the workshop. She was a learner along with the rest of us. And there was a technique that the instructor taught us, and your mother was absolutely enthralled with it and said, that is brilliant. I'm not going to start doing that in my business because the women who work for me are already doing things in a way that works, but I love that. And I remember thinking how brilliant that was, that she could accept that this was a great technique, but that it didn't necessarily need to work for her. And in the early stages of my business, if I learned something from an icon in our business, that was how I did it after that. I never stopped to think, oh, they have 3 people working in their workroom. I have me. Or that they had 4 machines that I didn't own yet. Like things like that, I just took that as that's the way to do it because so-and-so does it that way. Yeah. And it took a while, but that's one of the things I do admire about your mom is that she can acknowledge that that's great, but it's not for me and I'm going to move on. On the other hand, there were things that after 30 years, she said, oh, how did I not know that before? I'm going to start doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, there's always a start, stop, continue, so I think when you've got a really good idea and a very honest view of what is and isn't working in your business and what demands your attention, what needs your attention, what's urgent, that you need to put your attention on, being honest and having that view of your business and really having those honest conversations with yourself, that's what makes it easy to identify something that's new, exciting, wonderful, but say, it's just not wonderful for me right now. It doesn't mean in a year. It doesn't mean in 3 years. I mean, there are things that I've tucked away, and when I plan for 5 years out, I take a look at my note cards and what I said I wanted to be doing and some of the big ticket items. Oh, now is a good time for me to approach this. Now is a good time for me to invest in social media, right? Because last year was such a busy year responding and reacting. I didn't have the time to sit on YouTube, nor did I have a desire, right? Or to have my nose in another how-to book for something.
Right.
Sometimes we've got to just balance it out with where are we, what do we need, and who do I need to be for my business?
Right.
Does my business need more of me? Can I do it? Does my business require this, or is this just something that I want to do for my business?
Right, right.
You know, so, and that's part of the business design that I bring to the table.
Okay.
Designing a business, it's for you to take a business out of a box. It'll be cute for a little while, but there's going to be such friction with the alignment and the integration of your life and your ownership and the joy you have in running your business. You know, teaching someone how to design a business that works for them looks at the personal, the balance, the lifestyle that you want to live, how you want to show up.
Your own values. Yeah.
Values, right? The people that you have working for you and the people that you work with. All of those contribute to how am I going to design this business so that it works for me, so that I'm able to show up in a way that the business requires of me,
right.
Happier, enthused, excited, motivated, and that it doesn't constantly drain me
right.
of what it needs.
Right.
You know?
Elki, I think that resiliency is such an important skill. Mm-hmm. I would love to know in what ways you think you're resilient. And I might want to add, and has that changed since you started your own business? Have you noticed resiliency that you didn't notice before?
I could definitely answer the second question much quicker than the first. Yes, my resiliency has absolutely changed since I left corporate and started my own business. And it looks different, again, talking about the skills and the armor that you need for a certain environment. You know, I had teams of people at all different time zones that would like hop to on their Blackberries and do whatever I threw out there, you know, and I had people that were just baked into the organization to catch my great ideas and, you know, really run it through the pressure cooker and say, like, is this viable? Is it not? I didn't have that. Right. I had to recreate some of those things. And so I had to learn how to let go of stuff, adopt new ways of thinking. So a lot of that resiliency in me showed up in having those honest conversations. Okay. I need this. I need these type of people around me. I need someone to go to cry to. I need someone to go to say, I don't know anything. It took me, this is a small example. It probably took me 3.5 years to find a CPA I loved. Okay. Not because they weren't qualified, but because I kept after. I said, I need a CPA that's going to teach, because I'm not a tax woman, but I advise small business owners. Money and taxes are a part of the conversation. Yes, so I need to know enough, again, to be directionally correct, not to be the authority. And I wanted a CPA who was going to be willing to teach me the whys as opposed to just telling me what I'm going to do. As a small business, and I needed to find that. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's how resiliency shows up in, am I willing to go the extra mile to fight for what I need? Mm-hmm. For me, for my business, for my clients. Am I willing to come back after a blunder, after a fall?
Yes.
If I were to look straight over the camera right now, on my whiteboard says, put your pride aside. And it's been there for about 18 months.
Oh, that's a good one.
And I look at it, it's right in my line of sight. I look at it many times a day because there are a lot of decisions that are neither here nor there, but they're fueled by pride. And often that pride makes things pretty murky, and it's pretty hard. You know, as a business owner, we're working from home, many of us. Mm-hmm. Many of us have shops, right? Who am I going to be prideful for? My plants? But it creeps in. It becomes a part of the authority, the voice. And so putting your pride aside is typically after I make a blunder. Well, for me to have put it up on my whiteboard must mean that I make some blunders. Yeah. I do. Yeah. I'm human. There are things that I'm like, didn't like how that turned out, or wanted to get back to that yesterday.
Yeah.
And so I just put your pride aside. Get to it now. Get to it today. Do what you've got to do. So I'd say that that's a bit of how I see my resiliency show up.
Okay.
And there's a lot of things that I have to just be willing to explore. I don't have children of my own. I have a lot of close friends of mine who have kids, and one of the things I've loved learning and witnessing from them is how unapologetically curious they are.
Yes.
Like, they will, in order to reach for the plant for the first time, they might knock over their bottle, their water, books. They don't care. They were reaching for the plant, and they got the plant. That was their success. Everything else that fell off the table,
not important. Right.
Not important. I got to the plant. That was my goal.
Great analogy. I love that.
And I love witnessing that in children, because it reminds me that things are likely going to fall as I'm reaching forward towards something. But it shouldn't keep me from reaching, right? Like, as I get more skilled, I'll be able to reach for the plant without knocking things over. But
that is a great analogy, Elki. I love that. I love that. So you mentioned a lot of the feelings that go along with this, and this is a question I ask all of my guests. Have you ever thought about quitting?
Oh, yeah.
I love asking this question because I get such diverse answers.
Oh, yeah.
And what stopped you from quitting?
It's the list that I made alongside the list of what I was going to mourn leaving were also the reasons of why I was leaving, what I did not like.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this book was so powerful for me at that time, and, I've transformed a lot of the exercise and made them more personal over the years, but it's a list that I still have, why I left corporate. And so it literally, I have to read maybe 3 things for me to be reminded of, like,
this is it. Okay.
I'm not going back in there. But there's also the things that I love about what I do. And so this year, it's the beginning of the year, 2020 was a catastrophe for so many of us, right? Even those of us that know what we're doing day in and day out, it was so many challenges.
Yes.
So I made the bold move, and I reached out to a number of clients. I put together a survey, and I wanted to hear from them. Because again, last year was a year of, there were things I had to let go of. I had to let go of what this goal was and say, we're getting closer, right? Our goal right now isn't to reach it. Our goal is to get as close as we can to it. Like, we all had to give ourselves space to be flexible, to be in a space of uncertainty, to recognize that there were pressures outside of us that were affecting us, right? We all had a good lesson in being a little kinder to ourselves. And so I took the bold move of making the survey and reaching out to my clients and asking them to respond, why they like working with me, what I do, what value I drive in their business, what do they, and it was phenomenal. It's part of an exercise for marketing, but it's also so that I'm not imagining what they say. It was hard data. When I saw how quickly my clients responded to these 10 questions, I was honored and floored. And those are things that in corporate, they teach you to keep like a brag folder, all your accomplishments and things. Well, I've carried that over. These are things I was so humbled reading their responses and seeing how they perceived the value that I drove for them, how I empowered them and sharpened them and re-energized them. One of my clients said, I helped her to fall in love with her business again.
Oh, what a beautiful thing to hear.
And I'm thinking, I know the work we did together in 2020, she was pissed with me for most of the year because I was having her do some hard things.
Okay.
None of us could have predicted COVID. No. And then her summary, her reflection of my work in her life was that I helped her to fall in love with her business again. Oh my gosh, what a reward.
Yes.
And so sometimes, to bring this back around to your question, sometimes we need to get out of ourselves and hear what other people, like the good, be reminded of the good that we do. Hearing feedback directly from the mouths of my clients like that, those are things that remind me as to why I do what I do. I look at women like my mother, who she's a superwoman, any which way you cut it. And to see her enthusiasm, her joy, the excitement that she gets, and there are times, and I know when she's on a project that she absolutely loves, because I'll see the pictures. I'll see the pictures in the family chat. Yeah. If I'm going over there, hey, stop by the shop. I want to show you something. Mm-hmm. She loves to show off her work. Who of us doesn't?
Right.
We do something that our heart and soul is in, and there's alignment. Man, it's like fireworks going off. Those moments that we say, this is why I'm still in it, And so those are the things that kept me from going back to corporate.
I love that. And I will share that I got some negative feedback about something, and I was talking with your mom about it, and she told me to start looking for the emails, the text messages, the notes from people who appreciated what I had done, whether it was the podcast or window treatments. And I have a file of those things. And when I'm having a bad day or I've made a mistake that I'm not sure how I'm going to take care of, I will look at some of those. And, an email from somebody who says, I love listening to the podcast. It means so much to me. It's like, okay, this is why I'm doing this, just like you said. And so anyone who's listening or watching this on YouTube, please do that for yourself. I think it's life-changing to be able to, we all remember the negative comments. We all remember the boy in 10th grade who told us we were ugly. Yeah. It was 40 years ago. Move on, Seal. It's just, and I really do. I bring that up once in a while as an example. So much more has happened since then. So look at the things that are good in your life and keep that little stack. Your mom told me to print them, but I have them in a digital file. But one or two once in a while I print and I put over on the wall next to me so I can see them. And I think that's really important for people to do, especially because when I ask that, have you ever considered quitting question, the answer is frequently yes. So we all need it, obviously.
Absolutely. And, to that same point, there's, to your point of resiliency, it's the rocks in the brook that make it sing, right? And for us to have moved into this space as business owners, as entrepreneurs, there are rocks. Yeah. We'd be foolish to think that there are no rocks. But so much of resiliency is that bounce back. And if one of those screenshots of a text message from a client who's crying or, loves your work, those glory moments, if those help you to bounce back quicker, that's what we need. That's one of the keys to being resilient. We're always going to wind up on the bottom, right? Yeah. Like we're always going to hit a rock. We're going to hit a bump. We got to go around. We got to go over, whatever we do. But key is to just keep getting up. Yeah. And those are the things that help fuel us internally to keep getting up, keep getting our vision up, keep growing our vision.
I love that.
What we wanted it to be.
I love that. So you mentioned books, and I am a huge fan of books. I almost always ask this question as well. You mentioned Now What? Are there any other books that you've read that really made a huge impact on you?
Oof, there are so many. So one that I constantly share with my mentees is titled You Just Don't Understand. Okay. And the author of that is Deborah Tannen.
Okay.
Deborah Tannen. And it's a really fascinating book. She's a sociologist and a researcher, and she looks at the ways that women communicate with women and men communicate with men.
Oh, fascinating.
Not advocating for which one is right or wrong, but she rather is looking at the reason why there are a lot of communication gaps at times. I think it's phenomenal for any person in business because it gives insight to how other genders tend to communicate.
Right.
And whether that's with people that you work with, your suppliers, your vendors, I mean, there's so much to be gained. Yeah. Even personally, there's so much to be gained. There's another book that I also wanted to recommend. It's called Multipliers. And that is by the Weissman Group. And that is another phenomenal book. And she pretty much talks about leadership in terms of if you are multiplying or diminishing. Now, some of us, again, we might not have teams of 2 or 20. However, the value in this book, even still for entrepreneurs, is the fact that she outlines I think it's about 8 different behaviors that lead to diminishing or multiplying, maximizing. And those behaviors, especially as entrepreneurs, are so important to identify because they'll minimize our vision. They'll minimize our creativity. They'll minimize our passion. They'll minimize and diminish our excitement in running and leading our business. On the flip side, we can also maximize those.
Okay. That I'll be very curious about that book, and I'll put links to these books in the show notes, and they'll be with the podcast and also with the YouTube. So there will be show notes and links to all of the books that we talked about. So Elki, I really could talk to you for the rest of the afternoon. However, the final question that I love to ask is, what is your best piece of advice for new business owners or for people who have been in business for a while?
I think that's a great question, Seal. My answer is very simple. I would say that no matter what stage of business ownership and leadership that you find yourself in, always take time to sharpen the saw, which means take that reflective time to look at what you need for your business, what your business needs. We can call it strategy planning. We can talk about growth planning. We can talk about personal development, but gift yourself the time and the space to sit down and say, okay, I've been doing this for 3 years or 15 years or for 25 years. What are some new exciting things I want to throw on the horizon? What are some things that I could really stand to get better? I looked at 2020 and there were things I was like, oh, I'm not doing that again. Right. I'm taking that right off the list, you know? And that's what I would say. Gift yourself that time of reflection and to sharpen the saw. Franklin Covey, another great book I love to toss around. There's so many things that book taught me over the years, but he makes that great analogy about, if you had a tree and you had a saw and you had to cut it down, what would your approach be? And in short, he says, I'd make sure that my saw was I'd take all the time to sharpen my saw so that when I'm cutting the tree, it's just one time, And I certainly think in your industry as fabricators, you guys, it's not lost on you, the sharpness of things, you measure twice, cut once, there are a lot of things that are really right up your alley there. But that's, I think, one of the things that I would say, no matter what stage a business owner is in, that is just so vital.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Elki, it's been a delight to talk with you. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. And for anyone who's listening, who is a member of the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library, Elki did a Circle Time webinar for us that is recorded and is on there. So again, I could talk to you all afternoon, but I know we both have other things to do. So thank you again, Elki.
Thank you, Seal. This was fantastic.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Elki today. I feel like I've learned so much, and she reinforced a number of things for me as well as I've learned quite a bit today. I will put a link to Elki Consulting Group in the show notes for the podcast as well as the YouTube recording. And if you want to, you can reach out to Elki that way. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day.